1, 2. Welcome, everyone. Of course, this will be in English today because of our guest.
Because of me.
For anyone who doesn't know me, I am Afrodíti Γκόνου, the art advisor to the contemporary program of the Museum of Cycladic Art. And we have today with us Martine Chatillon, a friend who I've known for many, many years. She has been in the art world many years doing lots of amazing projects in different forms. And recently has started this agency, I should call it?
Agency, yes, it has no name really.
MDAC. They're doing super amazing projects that we will talk about a little bit later. But before we get to that, I will just say a few words about where she comes from. So Martine is half French, born in California, lived in Mexico, lived in Canada. Your parents are your father, marine biologist, and your mom?
She was a professor of psycholinguistics.
Yeah, so she does have a background that has a lot of interesting influences and a lot of science, if I may say. So, you know, finding that about you sort of made sense with what you did later on. And you started, Martine started working initially with museums, National Gallery, Whitechapel Gallery in development, which meant basically bringing industries, other industries to
Yes.
the museum world to support big projects that you wanted to produce, right?
Exactly. So I joined the National Gallery many years ago in the days of Margaret Thatcher, who had decided that the government was no longer going to support the arts, and so we'd better get on with it. And so we created something at the time called the Trust Office, which was in fact the first ever development office in Europe that was built on an American model. So we really went to take money from the rich and give it to culture. And we did that through large private patronage and through kind of corporate sponsorship. And it was at a time in the 80s when money was raining down on London. And there were a lot of fantastic, generous, wealthy individuals who helped us do what we did.
And I think through this relationship with the National Gallery, I think you ended up also working for a very important cultural foundation.
Yes, so when I joined the National Gallery, I was lucky enough to work with an incredible combination of people, and an extraordinary director called Neil McGregor, who was then subsequently director of the British Museum and then went off to work in Berlin. But really a visionary director of the institution, and his chair, who was the head of the Rothschild family, the English Rothschild family, called Jacob Rothschild. And together they were an unlikely but completely extraordinary alchemical duo.
And maybe we should show.
So this, you know, I'm sure some of you, most of you have seen the National Gallery. So I really come from the institutional. I began my career in the institution. And it's still very dear to my heart. When I went to work for Jacob, I worked on 3 projects. I worked on the restoration of this Rothschild Palace, 19th century palace that was built by a German Rothschild in England and then gifted to the National Trust, and full of incredible French treasures. French people weep when they go there, because it's full of things from the Louvre and from Versailles that had been bought by the German Rothschild who built this. And then it fell slightly into disrepair, and Jacob kind of leased it back from the National Trust and restored it within an inch of its life. I also worked on the building of the Supreme Court in Jerusalem, which was a pendant to the Knesset, which had been given by the Rothschild family to the state. And this was then gifted as a sort of, as I said, as a kind of pendant. So I worked on the architectural competition that resulted in this building, and a lot of the artistic commissions that related to its launch. And I also worked on an excavation in the south of Albania, which was a kind of new model for sustainable tourism in that part of the Mediterranean basin, and was founded by Jacob Rothschild and Lord Sainsbury, who were very close friends. And the relationship with Jacob is that he had a house in Corfu that overlooked Albania. And he decided to knock on the door of the Albanian government and said, let me help you. So we worked on that, and then I decided that I really was very interested in contemporary art, and I went to the Whitechapel and was head of development there.
And right after that, which is about when we meet, I think we probably met when you were there, I can't remember, or next step is a gallery. You
so the next
founded
step,
Thomas Dane Gallery in 2004.
2004, 2004.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, so this is Duke Street, St. James. Some of you may know it. There were 2 galleries in Duke Street, and we began, none of us had run a gallery before, and we kind of thought, well, let's give it a go. There was one particular reason why we opened this gallery, and it was for an artist who wanted us to represent him called Steve McQueen. And Steve, who is an artist who works in the moving image, did not have representation in London at the time, and we thought, okay, might as well start here. And then we...
And basically, this is the moment where you really start working closely, mainly with artists who use film, because you find it interesting, or they find that you are the best person to work on these projects. Somehow
well, it became a habit.
Yeah.
I mean, because when we opened the gallery, Steve was given to me, or maybe I took him to work with. My colleagues tended to work with painters and sculptors, and because I started working with Steve, anything you had to plug in, anything you had to produce, anything that was a little bit complicated, they would say, talk to Martine. So it became, in a way, my way of working and my way of kind of understanding the art world, in a way.
And I must say that at the time in London, people would say, oh, Martine is the film person. You know, if anybody wants anything to do with film, Martine is the person. And of course, you produce some amazing works that some of you might remember or might have seen. You helped, probably the gallery helped the Venice Biennial film that we all absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And this is the moment in the gallery where basically Steve goes a further step towards the film industry, right?
Exactly. So in the early 2000s, Steve was producing artworks in what we call the moving image, so kind of film and video based work. And then he was asked by Channel 4 or Film 4 to go and make a feature film. So this is not something I was involved with. I mean, it's something I followed as a sort of parallel, and I kind of kept trying to peek into the curtains. But this is something that he did independently while doing his artworks as well. And then he was given the honor to represent Britain at the Venice Biennial in 2005. And this is after he had produced his first film. And I was really struck by the change that had occurred in his work. So suddenly, he made a film. So this I did produce, which is the one we showed in Venice. This is a short film. But this one was different from his previous in that suddenly there was a kind of element of narrative. And I really felt that the production of a kind of feature film, which had narrative, which had actors, had really sort of impregnated itself into this. But what also struck me is that suddenly he had this kind of other career, which was making feature film, but also making videos. So he made a video with Kanye West, which not a lot of people saw, and also some commercial work. And what struck me is that that's not something that the gallery was involved with, although we had built his career for many, many years, for 10 years before that. So I was kind of intrigued going, how come we're not doing these deals? So that was my ta-da moment, my light bulb. This is him winning an Oscar, which unfortunately I'm not responsible for.
But this was, yes, a proper film, as we all remember, that it was like sort of gone on the other side to the film industry. And then Ashes was one of the films that you produced from the gallery, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Ashes...
before you say that, can I say that Ashes is one of my favorite works ever. Piece. If anyone hasn't seen it, please try to see it somewhere. It's very poetic, very moving. It's basically, do we have an image? I think we have an image. Yeah. On one side, we see this beautiful, beautiful boy. And on the other side, usually you have this, what happened to him later. I mean, I don't want to spoil. You tell us a little bit about the project.
Well, I mean, first of all, one thing that's interesting about it is that it was born as a result of a phone call from Tokyo, first thing. Second thing, which I don't think we've talked about, is actually it's offcuts from a very, very famous piece he did called Western Leap, Carib's Leap, which is it's a kind of pendant piece, kind of diptych that he did for Art Angel and became kind of incredibly famous. And this was on the cutting room floor, and he decided that this was a story he really wanted to tell. So it's the story of a young man who was helping them shoot the original film, Western Leap, or Carib's Leap, and when he went back to Grenada 10 years later, this is Steve, and he was like, and this guy was called Ashes. That was his like nickname. And he went back 10 years later, and he's like, I'd love to see Ashes here around. And he found out that he was killed. He was murdered in a kind of bungled drug deal. So, you know, it's a kind of elegiac portrait of this young, extraordinarily beautiful and vivacious young man.
And looking so innocent, and then he's caught up in something that is sort of happening where he lives, I guess, in sort of, right? It's very, very moving film. And so you're still at the gallery, but this is the moment where you start thinking, okay.
Yes, because the Ashes film, so again, the phone call from Tokyo was from a non-art world individual, so someone who worked with Louis Vuitton in Tokyo and who I had an indirect connection with, and who was quite a kind of brilliant young woman. And she said, what about if we commission him to make a film to be shown in the gallery above the Louis Vuitton store in Tokyo? Now, this is the kind of thing that was like unthinkable a few years prior to this. He would never have done this. So it's a kind of, it's starting to tell you that these worlds are beginning to get closer. And this is a kind of totally uncompromising commission where they commissioned the film, they showed the film, there was no ambiguity between commerce and retail and this. It just happened to be on top of the shop. And so I was kind of interested in that sort of, and that was happening a lot in Japan at the time.
And can I ask you, I mean, we always understand why the fashion industry would want to invite someone like Steve McQueen to do something for them. Why did he accept? Why was he intrigued by this project, you think?
Well, I have my own theory is that certainly all of the artists that I know are actually secret shoppers. All of them. And that includes Mr. McQueen, but it includes a lot of other ones. In fact, I can't name one that isn't. So that there is this kind of underlying attraction.
Love of...
Yeah, and particularly kind of great designers. So, you know, there are a few designers out there that really, you know, that artists consider to be their peers. And I mean, there's that. Why are they attracted? Because it's a different world, you know. We all get a little bit stuck in our habits in the art world, and I think it's that idea of the other, and the idea of, you know, somewhere across the parapet where you can go and play
and do something different. And one more project, the Western flag. Shall we show another amazing work for anyone who has, or you explain, yeah, you describe it.
It's a complex project. It looks very, very simple, but it's a very complex project. So this is with an artist called John Gerard. He's Irish. He works between Dublin and his production facilities in Vienna. I have worked with him for many, many years, and I continue to work with him, but this is something we did just before I left the gallery. So we were approached by Channel 4 to do something for broadcast. And normally television, when they're talking artists on television, it tends to be documentaries, they tend to be portraits of artists, and we didn't want to do that. What we wanted to do is use the medium of television to do something, to really kind of broadcast an artwork. So this we created, it was for Earth Day in 2017, I believe, which is, you know, in the UK and probably internationally, it's the kind of day in which we all start to pay attention to what we've been doing. And so this is first of all not a film, it's not a video, it is something which is atemporal. So it is a portrait of a landscape in Texas called Spindletop. And it is the place where in 1901, the first ever big oil strike ever happened in America. And so this is the beginning of the kind of petroleum economy in the US. And there was essentially one big gusher that kind of exploded in 1901, and there was essentially one kind of pumping tower, and within a year there were like 500 on this landscape, and this is basically the recreation of Spindletop as it is today, which is basically a desert. It's a toxic desert, and so the idea was to create this sort of mourning, this flag of mourning. It's a flag of sorrow in a way, to kind of evoke the kind of effects that this that the oil strike still has on a landscape like that, because all of the carbon dioxide that was emitted from the gusher at the time, and in fact all of the oil exploitation on this land remains in the soil. And so what this is how this was made is that they took very, very, very meticulous, they meticulously photographed this landscape, and they photographed it using digital cameras, using drones, even using satellite imagery. And so to the blade of grass, this is a recreation of the site in the virtual. So you're in a kind of virtual space. This is like a 3D model or a digital twin of exactly what this landscape looks like, to a very extraordinarily meticulous level. And inserted into it is, in a way, a kind of invisible sculpture. It's basically a sort of hallucination, in a way, which is this flag emitting digital carbon smoke. And the way that that's made by modeling turbulence. So these are coders and basically digital engineers who are building the idea of smokeness, so to speak, by modeling the things like you know, the burning fires in the Middle East, or sandstorms in Australia. And so essentially all this comes together, and it has a temporal element, so it goes through day and night on Texas time, and it's eternal. It does not ever go away or change. And
if we can show the next images of, like, it has been shown in various ways, and you'll be happy to know that a version of this, or the next step of this, will be shown in Greece next week.
Very shortly.
We were very happy. We actually realized while we were working on this talk that I think they have announced it already. Onassis Foundation is doing a project in Ioannina called Plasmata. And it will be one of the works. There is an artist among us, Nikomaki Karakostanoglu, who I think is also in the same project. And I hope you all make the effort to go and see it. It will be, I think, fantastic to see this kind of work, also not in Athens, but like in a place sort of in Greece that usually we don't see work. So very exciting.
So key, going back to our conversation, is key to this was the collaboration with a non-art world entity, which was a broadcaster.
Right. I mean, it's one of the most, you know, dramatic, spectacular. And you know what? We will talk about it a lot again and again. What I find amazingly interesting is that a lot of the artists who use all this amazing technology often use it to talk about the climate, to talk about, I mean, it's interesting that it sort of goes back to really about what we're doing with nature, right? Even though this is like,
the irony.
The sort of super technological world, a very, and also, you know, sometimes when we hear technology, we think it's going to be dry, it's going to be very scientific, and this is like one of the most beautiful visually works I have seen.
It doesn't need explaining. It's a kind of a totem in a way. It's like a, you know, it's a flag.
And so right after that, you decide, okay, that you need a new model to work on this. So shall we go to your lovely, explanatory?
I really thought.
So can I interrupt to say that I only understood now what Martine exactly does. You know, like a lot of us, we've been asking Martine, okay, so what exactly do you do? And she always said, you know, and we're like, oh, okay, it has to do with film, it has to do with technology, you know. But now I understood after all this. So you're. What is super interesting about what Martine is doing is that she's creating a new way of collaborating, a new platform, which is outside the usual a museum, gallery, or magazine, or book, or whatever one might use. So please.
Well, to those who don't know the kind of forensics about the art world, an artist is represented by a gallery in the way that a writer is represented by a literary agent, or like an actor is represented by a Hollywood agent. It's the same thing. And the ecosystem involves museums, art fairs, auction houses, biennials, collectors. Curators obviously are in all of these, or a lot of these gatekeepers. But that's basically their world. And I thought, well, there are 3 examples that I've just shown you of artists kind of stepping out of that world, and suddenly their audience grows, there are different sources of finance, there's a whole other way of thinking, and I thought this is really limited. So I really felt the limits of what the gallery can do. And so I decided to exit the gallery, and really with huge respect, because I know what gallerists do for artists. But I thought, why not keep, working with the gallerists, but also adding another kind of ring, so to speak, around it. So, and working with all these different industries, so that there was a much broader kind of surface around the artist for them to be doing, I guess, innovative things that don't necessarily come to an artist when they are just surrounded by the first ring. So that was my aha.
And also maybe something that doesn't create in the end a product that can be sold.
It can, sometimes it can, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes the product is like a midway thing, and so there's a product that emerges, but it's not the point necessarily.
And shall we go to your first? Oh no, we should.
This is just to sort of summarize what it is, and this is super important. I reckon if I'm not scared, then I'm not doing anything new. So that's my test for myself.
I think that's true for everyone.
Yes, and if the artist isn't a little bit worried, then we're not there yet.
So the first, is this one of the first projects that you did? So this is a collaboration between an artist, a sound artist, should I say, or musician. You should describe them. I mean, now I know who they are, but you should tell us all about them. But this is a work that is a collaboration. Yes.
Yeah. This is in a way my proof of concept. So as John Gerard, the artist who made the flag, he and I talk together all the time. We are like, okay, what are we going to do next? And I was struck by the fact that all of his works are absolutely silent, and silence is part of their power. But he also, and I hope he wouldn't mind my saying, but I don't think so, is a real techno freak. So he loves techno music, and he goes to techno clubs, and he has his own techno thing, and he is like a techno DJ. He's actually come out as a techno DJ. And I was like, that's interesting. So we decided that we would make a work that would involve that, which was naturally his sort of, his direction. So we went to find someone that we both agreed was the dude in the techno world. It was someone called Richie Horton. Richie has another incarnation called Plastic Man. So Richie Horton is like a techno DJ that just travels the world and has for many, many years, and comes from the Detroit techno scene. Lives in Berlin now. And he, who was not, who was not innocent to the art world, because he had done things at MoMA, and he had, he kind of understood that world. He said, let's collaborate. So we created a work which linked data as visual, which is John's work, and data as sound or music, which was Richie's work, and we combined them with, we collaborated with an amazing company in London called Bronze AI, and they developed a way for these two flows of data to interact randomly, or according to this algorithm, like eternally. It's actually not eternal, 365-day work, and then it repeats. But it's a work, and I'm going to just play this because it's kind of interesting, and to see human beings. John
Gerard, I'm an artist, and I've produced a new simulation which is an iridescent python. It's called a Dalbertus python, and she performs a figure of 8, biting her own tail, which is this ancient sign called an Ouroboros. And I am collaborating with this man here.
So I'm Richie Houghton, and I have the duty of bringing musical sonic life to John's python. I've created a set of musical sonic loops and vibrations, which we then feed into a system of AI-driven technology by our friends at Bronze, and that simulates a 365-day cycle of the python and brings this audio-visual piece together.
So this is just to show you Richie at MoMA, at the Guggenheim. He did something there. But all this to say that this beautiful snake came together as a kind of, like a techno, again a hallucination. It was like a techno, we created this sort of space. We were lucky enough to be, well, I remembered that my friend Adrian Joffe, who is someone who started a brand called Dover Street Market and Comme des Garçons, that he also was a techno freak. And so all these techno people, and then so I thought, and he was just opening this amazing new space in Paris, which is in the middle of the Marais. It's called 3537. It had never been used before. It was 20,000 square feet of, as you can see, amazing space. And I said, we're going to come and invade it. Is that okay? And he said, okay, why not? And so we did, and we installed that.
So can I just say that? So yes. Basically, it's Martine always behind all those things. If you see fashion people doing super amazing, because we remember that. I mean, this was an amazing project, and I wasn't even aware that this was, it was you. So basically, it's you knowing people in both worlds,
yes,
that you sort of think, can I just put them together? That was amazing, yeah.
And so it had a huge speaker stack, and then suddenly this space just became this incredible techno space between this iridescent snake and this huge techno stack, and everyone went crazy. It was a big success, but it was interesting because it was a completely new crowd, young people, club culture, not the usual suspects at all for us. And I think I really felt in John like this, wow, this is incredible.
And which I mean, is an amazing thing in itself, that this is actually what we want, right? We want to bring young people, not the usual suspects, to see this work. So by doing these projects, you kind of bring together also a whole other audience.
Yeah, because I think these people trust the brand of Dover Street Market, and then they kind of realize that, there's this other thing. Whereas if you put it in, a very sort of grown-up museum or gallery, it's definitely, I mean, they wouldn't take off their clothes and start dancing, which is really what they did.
And can we say that also these fashion shops or designers also seem to be quite willing to take risks, because they didn't know how this was going to work, fund it, without, like, museums are a little bit more like they need to be completely in control, they need to know what's going to happen or how it's going, so they're sort of a little bit more flexible,
They're particularly Dover Street Market, who are really like, I mean, half the people working there are under 20. And I mean, I have to say, from a funding point of view, I found someone to commission this. So this was commissioned by a private collector, so we could make it. And then it was shown by them, and they paid for the installation and everything else. But yeah, I mean, they're willing to get messy.
And then it went on to have more of a festival life, right?
So now it exists as this sort of entity that basically travels to music festivals. So it's like, it's like a plug-and-play techno club, and it went to a new art, technology, and music festival in Bentonville, Arkansas, if you can imagine, and which was incredible. And it was installed in this huge black pavilion, and for 3 days people kind of went crazy. This is not a picture of it, but you get the vibe. And so now it tours music festivals almost, it doesn't need us. It's just on automatic pilot in festivals. And then another one of your projects that we wanted to talk about is with Lawrence Leck, who we know from the gallery world. Also, we know that Sadie Coles, our friend, represents him, shows him.
So I was quite intrigued about how does this collaboration work between you and Sadie and Lawrence? When do you come in? How does this work?
Well, I work alongside galleries, and I'm very insistent on that. I don't want to work against them. We work very much together, and Sadie is someone I respect hugely and is also my neighbor. And she kind of said, you know, Lawrence wants to make a feature film. Can you just see what you can do? So, uh-oh, is that me?
Is that me?
It must be Sadie Coles. She's kind of denying. Sorry.
It's Sadie Coles.
It's actually John Gerard. Yeah, just, I'll shut him up for a second. And so she basically came to me and said, you know, would you take this on? And so that's how I work with all of these artists. John Gerard is now with Pace Gallery, and I work alongside them, and I do what I would call non-traditional, you know, non-gallery.
Switch it off.
Can you switch it off for me? You know, things that will, you know, galleries are very pressed for time and pressed for resources. What you're doing when you're representing an artist is you're trying to get works for sale, to be shown and to be shown in art fairs and so on and so forth. The other stuff is, you know, you really want to do it, but often there's not a lot of time. So I fill that gap, and I do that with Lawrence and Sadie. And so I took on this project, which is, maybe it's useful if I show you this. So Lawrence really comes from architecture. So he studied at the Architecture Association in London, and then he studied computing at Trinity in Cambridge, and then he did this really interesting PhD at the Royal College of Art, which was basically on cinematic world building. But he comes from the gaming aesthetic, and you know, you would normally see him, this, for example, is at the Venice Biennial in the Hyper Pavilion. This is in Hong Kong at K+. So, you know, with LED screens and this kind of aesthetic of gaming. But what we decided would be interesting is, like, what if you took all of this aesthetic and you decided to show it in the cinematic? So in a kind of old-fashioned way, which was, what if people are actually sitting in a theater and you're releasing this like you would release a feature film? So the one that we're working on is called Death Drive. It's very much kind of film noir. It's got a lot of suspense. It's kind of a road movie, but it's a road movie set in a kind of city in China in the near future, and it's a city that's designed to test intelligent machines. And the protagonist is a car, is a driverless car. And so I can show you the trailer.
你能描述一下你今天遇到的问题吗？
我很难过，大家都离开了这么久。
你确定大家都离开了吗？
我可以看到发生的一切，无处不在，无时无刻。 我的职责是在这城市间行驶，看守街道，确保没有人受伤。现在没人了，这便是一座鬼城，我无事可做。
你还感觉到什么？
即使和你说话，我也无法摆脱自己。
你说的对，你包含多个自我，我的声音。 就是你现在听到的声。
Okay, so you kind of get the vibe. So it's an interesting project, also because he's an electronic musician, apart from being, you know, other things. A real polymath, this person, and so he's also involved in making the music with.
And this work we will see in cinemas as a.
And you'll see in cinemas. We're not there yet, but we're getting there.
When we get there, we will see it in a cinema.
Yeah.
And shall we move to Philippe
yes.
Barreno, your collaboration with him?
Yes.
Philippe Barreno, some of you know, is quite a famous artist, and you have done quite a few collaborations with, again, fashion industry events. Shall we see the first one, which is...
Yeah, so Philippe is someone who came to me, Esther Schipper, who's one of his gallerists, came to me and said he wants to do an X, Y, and Z. That wasn't the first one, so we're working on a feature film, we're working on an opera, and this one came really through Nicolas Ghesquière approaching Philippe Parreno and saying, would you create a sculpture for my next show? And that was you know, that's how it happened. So I did not bring Vuitton in this particular case, but I basically worked with them on making it happen. So this was in October of last year, and it's in the Cour Carrée of the Louvre Museum, and it's basically, I mean, it's called Monster Flower, and it's basically a 15-minute apparition. It was used for 15 minutes. It took about 2 weeks to install. There was enormous resources spent on it, and it just kind of appeared fully Parreno. It had a lot of the hallmarks of his work, which was, it was kinetic, it was in many ways informed by a lot of sensors in the building, and basically it was there for 15 minutes and then it disappeared. I'll show you a little bit of the thing because it's kind of fun. We may not be able to see it. Is it me? I'm not very good at this. So all this is part of the, you know, it's basically a kind of utilitarian sculpture for 15 minutes.
I mean, I know you will show us a few more that Philippe Parreno did, but at this point, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the fact, because, you know, we've had also discussions in Greece and in many places about, you know, when fashion tries to show things in maybe museums or archaeological sites or in sort of areas that we normally don't expect to see fashion. And it seems to me that these projects are quite different from others. Like there are some projects that you feel are sort of very, sort of feel much more commercialized. I mean, I don't want to be completely specific, but like, for example, when an artist does a bag for a fashion label, or even like, I don't know, this year's Kusama collaboration was talked a lot about, and a lot of people did not love it. In the sense that it was more sort of, it was closer to the commercial side than to the art side. These projects seem to be quite experimental, and it seems like they take into their world the fashion element as opposed to the other way around. What do you think? Is it because they work very well together? Is it because they it's a special collaboration? Why
I think it's because it begins with two artists speaking together. So if you think of Nicolas Ghesquière as an artist and speaking to another artist, it's essentially a collaborative work. It's not the merchandising department, or it's not the marketing department. It doesn't come from there. It comes from this, you know, the place of kind of creativity. There was no merchandise attached to this. His name was very, very little mentioned. He loved that. So he loved the fact that he was not the one that was being stared at, that it wasn't about him, that he had the opportunity of doing something really on a huge scale that would only last 15 minutes. And then it was gone. I think it was that it happens very quickly. Like they call you, and 3 months later, it's done, and then it's gone. So there's something about a very short gestation period, mega resources, I have to say, and you know, and a real kind of artistic collaboration. So that I wouldn't, MDAC wouldn't do the handbag thing. We just wouldn't do it.
And I think you have a few more to show us.
I just said we did one, as a result of that one, we did another one, which this one is a sound chamber. This is again Philippe, with an incredible sound person he's worked with a lot, called Nicolas Becker. And it's essentially creating a machine to create, to kind of bring the sounds of Paris into, you know, into this kind of lab inside the Musée d'Orsay. And with the use of a lot of very, very, very complex acoustic, I hope I don't do this again. Why am I not good at this? I think I would be. So a lot of the sound was pre-recorded and then distributed throughout the space using a lot of these speakers underneath the stage. And these are not her steps, they're other steps. And we worked on both of these shows with a remarkable man called James Chinland, and James is the production designer from Batman, The Batman, who we've started working with a lot in order to
and now we found ourselves with this other amazing
we're in Denmark now.
Artist, who I should mention that is, again, I sort of realized while we were working on this, is one of the artists that you can experience, I should say, it's probably the right verb, at the National Garden. He's one of the artists, one of the virtual project that you can visit with Outset, the production of Outset. I forgot the title, but you all know the one I mean. Seeing the Invisible, exactly. So basically you go with your phones, you should download the app, you go at the National Gallery with your phone and you see lots of artists, and one of the artists, yes. National, what did I say?
National Gallery.
National Gallery, yes, National Garden. So yeah, I mean, amazing. I have watched a few of his films, and he's one of those people that basically brings together science, technology, but it's all about ecology, right? So
well, what's interesting, what interested me about him, so he's a young Danish person, and he has no gallery. He's never had a gallery, because he comes from gaming. And so the art world to him is just this kind of place over there that he doesn't really understand, except that he's navigating with incredible skill, because he's had shows at the Luma Foundation in Arles. He did a project with the Serpentine. He's done stuff with Light and Art Space in Berlin. So he has this uncanny ability to sort of find his way in some of the best institutions, although he really doesn't understand the mechanism of the art world. So he came to me and he said, we're working on a big project. Would you work with me as my agent in this? And so this is basically building a gaming platform, but like building it over a series of stages, and each one of the stages will be an exhibition, and will be an exhibition, and all that aggregate material will end up being on a gaming platform that we will then publish with a big game publisher. We have to hurry up. We're getting late. This is a show of his in Berlin called Barrel. This is to show you the aesthetics. So this is a sneak preview of some of the avatars that will exist in the game that we're doing. But basically, the game is about unseen natural ecosystems and basically madness and mental health.
and I should say that try to watch something. And there are a few of his films on YouTube, like maybe just the trailer or.
Well, they're not films, so we can't use
sorry,
that word.
Films, sorry.
Yeah, you can go.
Works, yes.
Yeah, you can go online, and if you look at Light and Art Space, for example, they did this fantastic, and there's some, there's footage of him walking through the exhibition.
And I think you understand also a little bit how he works, how he gets all the imagery, a really amazing work, I must say. And yes, I think before, we need to talk a little bit about DAO. Martine, when she left the gallery, she worked on a project that is so huge and so complicated that we will keep for another talk. But if you could just say a little bit about your role, yes, and especially mention the one Greek person, yes, who is involved. And
this is the Greek person. So I was brought into this project, which already was 12 years old, and I was brought in as the exec producer of the release of this project, which was pretty wild. It was like taking a wild horse and trying to get it to do dressage, which it didn't. But it's essentially a kind of social experiment come film project in which hundreds of people relived 30 years of the Soviet Union in a kind of a recreated theoretical Institute of Theoretical Physics, and that was filmed. So 700 hours of 35mm came to London in 2015, and that's where I was asked to turn it into a bunch of feature films, technological platform, and we released it in these two. We released it in Paris. The director did not want to release it in the film world, so we released it in Paris in these two opera houses facing each other. They were under construction, and we basically recreated again a kind of Soviet state with the Centre Pompidou as well. And so the central figure of this epic is called Theodore Kourentsis, and he is a brilliant Greek orchestra conductor. I mean, like beyond brilliant.
Can I say that it's already sold out, but we should tell you that he is next week at the Rodion Athens Festival.
Yeah.
So yeah, get the tickets on the black market.
Yes, it's really worth it. So we'll pass, and this is one of the only images of the inside of DAO, because it wasn't allowed to be filmed. No one was allowed in with a camera. So I think I snuck that one.
And you did something with Comme des Garçons?
Yeah, so again, we did this fantastic collaboration with Comme des Garçons. They decided that they wanted to use, so there are 2 million images in the DAO archive, and Ray Kawakubo, who is he's the chief designer of Comme des Garçons, decided to use these images for all of their publicity for an entire year. And so they created what we call these DMs, which are basically these booklets that would appear magically. I think they appeared 40 times during the course of the year. So if you were like one of the best architects in the world or one of the best designers in the world, or a particular universe that Comme des Garçons is particularly interested in, they basically mailed them to all these people. So it was really, really interesting, kind of targeted. It was teasing almost, because there was very little information in it. And then they did an exhibition in their store in Aoyama in Tokyo, and then also in London.
And one more thing, which again can be another whole talk, Somerset House.
Yes.
You're on the board
Yes.
of Somerset House. I think especially for the artists here today, it's interesting to just mention what they do.
So I sit on the board, and I'm not involved in the programming. That's very much what the what the executive committee does, but. Or the executive team, but basically Somerset House this is what you see. So it's one of the greatest 18th century buildings in London. It used to belong to the Treasury. This was a car park full of cars. It was full of great people in suits doing dull things, and then at one point it was decided that they should be cleared out, and basically to create, this is 20 years ago, so it's a very young institution, although it looks like this, and essentially it was to create a center for innovation. Cultural innovation. So these spaces are basically occupied, rented to, and very heavily vetted cultural, the cultural industries, so to speak. So they could be dance companies, they could be fashion designers, or they could be X, Y, and Z. But the bit that's really interesting, and the bit that people don't really know, is that underneath and to the side are 70 artists working in studios as part of the Somerset House studios. And these are extraordinary people. mostly working in technology, or working in, with technology at its core. So there are no painters and sculptors, but there are music people, film people, gaming people. Lawrence Leck, for example, is there. Christian Markley, who did this famous piece called The Clock, is there. Lots of fantastic people. And it's something that I'm, as a board member, I'm really keen on doing, which is to kind of make people realize that there's this incredible battery of creativity that's sitting near the courtyard that no one is really seeing enough of. So that's my mission.
And just to say that, because, right now AI is so much the thing that everybody talks about, and often there's like a lot of sort of fear writing, like, is it going to take over art? Is it going to take over, And in fact, what we see is that it's a fantastic new medium that artists can use and make amazing things with. It's just something to learn about and find out and use, and these artists come up with amazing projects from.
Yeah, it's something. I think of the future as a medium, not as a destination, and I think of AI as part of that as well. So it's something where we can all be afraid. Speculation, of course, leads often to fear. But I think the more one sees intelligent people using it intelligently to kind of intuit what these things could look like, because there are a lot of dystopias in the work of Lawrence Leck, but it's comforting to go through them in a fictional way before we go through them in a real way.
And before we end, is there something that you are working now on and that we can see maybe in the near future that we can...
One person, so I'm just showing you a few more images of Somerset. Ooh, I'm not.
Yes.
A few more images of Somerset House, the people who work there. Did you want to talk about
yes, please, yes. That was...
this is a really interesting collaboration that happened when Somerset House and UAL, which is University of the Arts, the Creative Computing Institute, they essentially work together with the Alan Turing Institute, which is the National Institute for Data and AI, and the Riken Institute, which is the Japanese equivalent. And they essentially created this project called Path AI, which was to look at post-pandemic use of all this data that we all surrendered willingly during the pandemic, because we told people where we were no longer, who we were in touch with, whether we were infected, when we were no longer infected. And so it was basically looking at the behavior of governments in terms of the use of this data. And so what that looked like was 3 artist residencies, which you can look online because they don't really exist anywhere else but online, but they're really worth looking at. And that was a result of a competition that was launched internationally. And these 3 artists came to Somerset House. There was a kind of small exhibition, which is actually going to go to Goa. It's something really worth looking to. But it's a project which really encapsulates what Somerset House is about.
And
then next. Well, strangely, I've started working with someone who's not in the art world. So although Jakob, the young Danish gamer, is not from the art world, this person is incredibly famous, not in the art world, and she's someone called Ez Devlin. And Ez is a production designer, and she has worked in theaters all over the world, opera houses all over the world. She has done every Kanye show, Beyonce show, Adele. There's no pop star she hasn't produced. She's just done the recent Beyonce show. She's done the Olympics. So she's one of these people who's just literally unbelievable. She's getting close to the art world. She did a piece which is just outside the Tate Modern. But she wants to work with me, or wanted to work with me, and I have agreed that we're going to work on, in a way, part of her practice that is closer to the art world. And one of the things we're working on, which is a big monograph, which is coming out, Thompson Hudson monograph, which will come out in early September, and then this big exhibition of her work at the Cooper Hewitt in New York, which really kind of unpacks her practice. So and there are a few other things which I can't talk about right now.
So I think at this point we will open for questions, and maybe we can have the lights on somebody for anyone.
What does MDAC stand for?
It's Martine d'Anglejean Châtillon, and John Gerard, it's John Gerard's fault. He just said, "Would you just shut up, call it MDAC, and just start?" Because I was like, "Really?" So that's where it comes from. It's my name.
I enjoyed seeing a lot of your work. Thank you so much. And because we went through so many different artists, I can't remember everybody's name, so excuse me.
That's
fine. The flagpole that had the billowing black smoke coming out of it was very visually arresting and also quite moving to myself and perhaps others in this audience. But when I was told that it was digitally created, meticulously as it was, there was a little bit of a sense of a loss, and I wanted to see if you could speak to that. And I'm sure I'm not the first to sort of think of something that looks so real as being real, and then having a sort of a mixed experience of it when it's no longer understood to be real because it really actually looks so real. And it also brought to mind so many artists who have gone out of their way to create exceptional works with tremendous expense and great difficulty that are real. And I'd love to hear your thoughts a bit on that and that loss or potentially gain.
Well, I'm interested in your sense of loss, and I can understand it. I'm interested in these words that you use, which are the idea of the real and the not real. They're just real in different realms. You know, there are other ways of representing the world than cinema and photography. In a way, you could also argue that they're not real. They're light. And this is data. So, you know, in a way, this is a kind of simulation of the real, not dissimilar to the way that cinema would have appeared when it did. You know, like a twin, in a way. And I would love you to speak to this sense of loss, because it's very interesting to me. You know, I think that you're not alone in feeling that there's a loss of something in digital works. Yeah.
And without taking it too far in this context, I think part of the loss is, and what's real and not real, is the amount of hours that I might ascribe to the importance of a work. That's not necessarily fair, because you know, brilliance can be done in a nanosecond. But if I were to think of an artist going and sticking this down on the ground and putting it up and doing whatever, and sort of, and because it's not a game, which I could appreciate in that context as sort of the appreciation of art within a gaming context generated by AI. Anyway, you know.
So do you think, are you
there
saying
there is a loss. There is a loss, and there's also a sadness for prior artists who might have gone out of their way. In a way, I mean, part of the loss is that.
I think also we should not, I mean, the fact that it's not real, as Claire said, doesn't mean that it's not made out of a lot of labor in different ways, right? Like, this is not just an image that one finds on internet and uses it. This, maybe you can say a few words about how complicated this was.
Sure, but
create,
I don't think
right?
that complicated necessarily means good.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of complicated stuff that actually doesn't.
Yeah, true. Yes.
So I think that I completely understand. It's not that I understand. I intuit what you're saying. That in a way there's something acorporeal about it. There's something that is you know, that is so seamless and so frictionless that you almost don't feel the tragedy that actually is there. So I understand that, but that I think is the nature of the digital. I think it has a kind of coolness, which to me is a little bit of a warning. There's a little bit of a kind of dangerous thing behind the digital, and to me it comes from this, you know, the fact that it is so frictionless, and there's a kind of humanity missing to it. And often there's never been people in his work, which is interesting. But this is the devastation that we create.
Anyone else? If there are no more questions, I would just like to say that this whole cycle of talks and our talk today was supported by our contemporary committee, support committee, and thank you. This was made possible by them.
Thank you.
We will have 2 more speakers that you will hear more soon about. Martine, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
We kind of understood now. So anyone who has ideas can call Martine. Then she will
come back in a year and I'll say it better.
She will be able to produce, anything that is in between all the worlds. Thank you. Thank you, Martine.
Thank you. Can I close?